Hey there. So today we are going to be talking about the November 2018 Diamond numbers. These are where Comic-Con gets their numbers, where they basically port over and add dollar signs to it. Yeah, this is where that kind of stuff comes from. We get all of those numbers brought in by Diamond. So of course, remember, these are shipment units going to physical locales, meaning local comic shops and on. When looking at these, remember that we are comparing year to year. We don't look at month to month because month to month is very misleading. For example, last month, people were talking about how great the month was. You know, when we compared that year to year, say October to October, well, yeah, it's because it had an extra week. So, of course, that's going to skew things a bit. If we looked also at that and we compare October to, say, November now, well, you're talking about an extra week that has been taken off. So, of course, when you're going month to month, those numbers are not going to look as good. What you want to look at is year to year earnings and then compare and contrast and see exactly what's going on. Now, when we go through this stuff too, I mean, when you look at the yearly numbers and even when you compare, say, these yearly numbers to the numbers that popped up, say, last month, well, I think that's very telling too. Like if you look at the year to date versus and you look at comics and you see the 1.48%, well, if you look at this just last month, it was at 2.13%. This despite the leading comic being a $7.99 title. Also, if you look at graphic novels and see exactly where they were, yeah, this month was not a good month. It has pushed out numbers even farther to the point that you are looking at pretty bad unit numbers when it comes to 2017's comparison. Now, when you think about 2017 too, remember that that year was one heck of a bad year. You're talking about one of the worst years in a while. And when you're comparing these numbers and you think, hey, these units, they keep on dropping, that's not good. And then when you think about why this number exists, why do you have earnings that are above 2017? Well, there are a few factors. Number one, think about what comics lead this year. Number one, Action Comics 1000, a comic brought to you at $8, a comic that sold over 500,000 units, making $4 million plus itself. When you look at the third spot, you'd be talking about Amazing Spider-Man 800, a comic that retailed at $9.99, a $10 comic book, again making over $4 million for itself. Then when we look at the fourth and fifth position out of the top five, we will be talking about two renumbers, reboots, reissues, however you want to approach that, where you're looking at $6 comics and you're looking at comics that need to be rebooted, so you have 20 to 40 covers. Well, all of that stacked together, and the LCS, they take that as a bludgeon. The number two comic was Batman 50. Batman 50 ended up returnable. It was one of those things that was a milestone, I would call it, but also when you look at that and you look at the calamity that ensued, yeah, that was a mess too. That is its own discussion by itself. But when you look at those lead comics and you ask yourself about them, and then also you look at the follow-ups, like say you look at that Fantastic Four number one, you look at its numbers, and then you notice a 67% decline when the numbers go from 1 to 2. You have a problem. All of these things, you have pricing points like you do, and you only have 1.48% increase, and you have a 6% plus decline in units. That says that there is a problem. Also, you're talking about $2.99 comics that used to come out bi-monthly. Those went up to $3.99. More of them keep falling too. Batman, for example, you're talking about $200,000 added on per month. And even with that addition per month, you're still talking about only 1.48% increase. So yeah, you have issues. Now, when you look at the marketplace and you look at exactly how companies set up, DC, they have taken it on the head. I mean, when you think about last year, you think about the year before, you look at DC, they were a mainstay player. They were on the rise, up and coming, getting awards and on. Now they've fallen off. I mean, look at the gap between Marvel and DC these days. You're talking about a pretty substantial gap. when it gets down to that. Then you look at Image. Image is actually fallen off some here. They usually sit around 10%. They've fallen off a bit. IDW, they're actually pulling forth. They have actually fallen out of that spot twice now. And that's, I think, very telling too. In fact, look how close the competition is with Dark Horse when it comes to the retail market share. You're talking about something that is pretty neck and neck here. In IDW, they actually have those new titles that have come out. The ones with Star Wars and also those Marvel lines. So they will help them maintain that. But again, look at what they had to do in order to get that. Now, like I said, we talked about the pricing point and on. And we've talked about how this month has actually caused a dip in the year-to-year numbers. If you look at the new titles shipped, you actually, again, you're talking about one less week on that. So, of course, when you go into comparable numbers, if you say last month, you had 95 new titles, 78 for DC, 78 for Image. Well, when you look at this, 79, 67, 57, you can see the fall off because, of course, you're talking about extra weeks, so you've got to calculate that in there. Now, when you're looking at the items shipped, the top 10 comics by unit shipped and then dollars invoiced, again, the number one comic here is an $8 comic book. That, and you still have a soft market that is coming in at the place that it is. An $8 comic. I mean, did you ever think that you would see that come up? Number two, you have the Green Lantern number one, $4.99 pricing point. Again, $1 above the baseline. Web of Venom, Carnage Reborn number one, $4.99. When you get into the placement of another comic for number 4, you'll notice Avengers 10 at $5.99 when it comes to dollars invoiced. And really, when you think about that, you have 4 comics out of the top 10 that are above the baseline. I mean, you're talking about a substantially high number when it gets into that. And again, 1.48% above and 6% decline in units. So seeing these, so like following out that, of course, you have your Batmans. They are a mainstay within this. You have your Spider-Mans that are listing here. Heroes in Crisis has managed to stay within the top 10. And Venom, number 8, is actually listing within the top 10 as well. Graphic novel wise, when we get into that, Venom by Donny Cates, it clocks out number 1. That's actually not surprising when you get into units shipped. Thanos, the Infinity Conflict coming in. Of course, all Thanos stuff has been pretty well delivered. The Immortal Hulk Volume 1, of course, comes in at number 6. That has been good. I won't pick it up because of certain issues with Al Ewing, but yeah, that's actually doing well. What's interesting, too, is if you look at Marvel and then you look at, say, Amazon lists Immortal Hulk as its number 1. So, I mean, this is kind of interesting that there's that kind of turnaround versus when you see their numbers. A Batman White Knight, you can see it listing here for its trade paperback. Good story there. Domino, Volume 1, Killer Instinct. When you're looking at that and you think about how many units it'll sell, it's kind of interesting to think where that'll pop up too. Now, looking at these, I thought that this was very interesting to see in here. The Silver Surfer by Slott, considering when I go out and I go to places like, say, Ollie's, the Dan Slott Silver Surfer, it's right there available for $4 That's right. I can pick that up. I, in fact, took pictures of that this week because I thought it was very telling. But, I mean, when you're looking at what's coming out for dollars invoiced, of course, the Mutant Massacre hardcover is going to be a big seller. Again, the Infinity Gauntlet, set that up. Absolute Transmetropolitan Volume 3, it's been doing really good within that, and so on. So you can see how that sets up. The top 10 books by unit shipped, so you can see how just regular books set up within that if you're curious as well. And then they get into toys, which I think toys has been interesting because it's doing better than anyone anticipated. When you were looking at double-digit decline numbers, I mean, when you were talking about a hole that didn't seem like it would ever ever be pushed out of, you actually have statues that have been selling and doing better. Some of these, like the Batman Who Laughs statue, the Batman and Catwoman statues and on. I mean, you can see what is selling within that, and I was surprised to actually see that doing well at all. Now, when you want to see the setup, if you want to see how much the differences are between dollar share and unit share, I think this is very telling. DC, at number 2, number 1, like that. I mean, that tells you quite a bit there. And then, of course, you have Image with this slice of the pie. And, I mean, when you look at this, all other publishers slapped in here. So you have a few that are owning, when you get into the smaller numbers, you have the 3, and then this is what is actually making up the rest of the market. That's why I say when stuff goes on, like when you think about number 1 and number 2 and how they impact the market, if people don't go in to buy a Marvel comic, if they don't want to go in to buy a DC comic, how does it impact all of these other retailers? Because people, they're not going to want to pick up, say, that number 3 or number 4 a lot of times. That's going to cause significant dips within those. And then when you get into smaller ones, well, it really just depends on how smart they are about bringing out titles. But I think all of this is telling. It draws up a map of exactly where this industry is. And this industry is not in a healthy place. Sure, you're going to have people out there that spin it. That's their job. They do that all the time. But, you also have people that are talking about how hard it is to make a living within this, how hard it is to actually ensure a wage. And then you see companies like IDW cutting that proverbial fat by going out and trimming off, say, $886,000 in print and also jobs and on, and then all of the money that they trimmed off in salaries, overhead, and that really shows you where this is. You can see it in the numbers that keep coming up over and over again. You can see it in the comparison years. This year is not a good year. You have an illusion being presented that says that this year is more viable than last year. But the way that that's been maintained, well, again, it's a facade. That kind of facade, we saw it within print. We saw it in magazines where people tried to pretend that something was going on. And one thing that they have going for them that magazines didn't, well, they have this whole distribution hub that, of course, they're chipping away little by little. I hear Diamond is not thrilled about that either. And why would they be? Honestly, why would they be? They have a monopoly on all of this stuff, and they see the deterioration of their pricing point because less units ship, and as less units ship, as less moves, well, they can see that proverbial writing on the wall. But anyhow, you tell me what you see here. Do you see it different? Do you think things are on the rise? What do you see within these tea leaves here? Also, if you like this kind of content, please consider supporting the channel. You can do so by simply subbing and liking. Very simple stuff there. If you also like it beyond, there are a couple of links within the description. Patreon, PayPal, and on that will allow you to do different things with the channel, get different kinds of content. I try to add more there and to basically give you more. But also, I add new content every day, so you can come back, check out the channel every day there. I definitely appreciate that. And, leave comments for sure. But as always, thank you for tuning in. Like I say, definitely appreciate that.